All right, hello there, thrill seekers. It's me and Ziggy over there barking at probably his doggy friend Hercules, who lives behind the fence. The thing you just heard at the beginning was a little bit of the riff of the song called Fuzzy and Wild by The Ventures from their Wild Things album. And I want to talk to you today about supernatural elements in Zen, specifically in Dogen's work. So, here goes. Somebody sent me this article. It is called Yume, which is the Japanese word for dream, and the subtitle is Visionary Experiences in the Lives of Great Masters Dogen and Keizan, and it is written by Reverends Daizui McPhillamy, Zensho Robertson, Ko Ten Benson, and Hubert Neerman of Shasta Abbey. And Shasta Abbey is a Zen monastery in Mount Shasta, California, and it was founded by a woman named Jiyu Kennett. I'm not sure what her birth name is. Jiyu is obviously a Dharma name, and she was interested in kind of combining the Anglican church service format with a Zen service, and so they sing hymns and stuff up there, I guess. I've never been up there. I've never been to a Shasta Abbey event, but I know a little bit about them from reading their main book, the most famous book by Jiyu Kennett. It was originally called Selling Water by the River, but then was reissued under the title Zen is Eternal Life. And I remember Tim McCarthy, my first Zen teacher, he had originally wanted to have Selling Water by the River be one of the books that he taught out of in the class that I first took about Zen Buddhism, but he decided against it when he tried to order it and found out it had been renamed Zen is Eternal Life, and he hated that title so much he refused to order the book. But then I eventually read it much later. So that's the deal with them, and this article seeks to show that Dogen had supernatural or paranormal sort of events in his life. Some people have been on the comments section accusing me of cherry-picking Dogen and not telling you the truth, and that he did really have supernatural events in his life. The folks who are saying that obviously haven't read my work or haven't followed my YouTube channel for, the bazillion years it's been on, which is understandable because who can watch all these damn videos? I can't even keep track of them all. But I've talked about this a lot, and so I'm going to talk about it again just to establish once again that I'm telling you everything about Dogen, or at least everything I think is relevant. Oh, geez, what is going on with my hair? The article points out 3 events which the authors say establish that Dogen had these sort of paranormal occurrences in his life. And the first one that they point out shows up in Shobogenzo Book 1 of the Nishijima Cross edition in a chapter called Shisho, which means Certificate of Transmission. But just to show you that I do write about this stuff, I covered that whole piece in my book Don't Be a Jerk a few years ago in a chapter titled Buddhist Paperwork. And it's about the various certificates of transmission. So whenever a person becomes a Buddhist master, for want of a better word, I don't really like that word, she or he receives a certificate. And this is very important. I have a certificate which I showed a few years ago on this channel. It's in the garage over there in a box. Everybody gets a certificate, and if you don't get a certificate, you didn't get the transmission. But the piece in question by Dogen recounts this story, and I'm just going to read you my version of this story. And I'm going to start in the middle, and it's about Dogen is talking about visiting various temples in China and seeing these certificates of transmission. And here's how I put it in my words. I just checked it against the Nishijima Cross translation, and I think mine is pretty close. It's just a bit kind of modern language. So here we go. Another time I was out visiting another temple. A teacher there said, "Have I ever shown you the transmission document I keep in my room?" I said no and asked if I could see it. He said, It's against the ancient custom to show it to anybody, but I had a dream the other night in which Zen Master Hojo of Daibaizan Mountain, who was a master who lived in the years 752 to 839, so this is a few hundred years before Dogen's time, which was the 1200s. He said that Zen master held up a branch of plum blossoms and said, "If you meet a true person who has stepped off the side of a ship, show him these blossoms." Then he gave me the blossoms. And what do you know? Here you are, someone who came to China on a ship. You must be the person Hojo told me about. If you want to get Dharma transmission from me, just say the word and I'll do it. And Dogen says, I didn't get his Dharma transmission, but I lit some incense and prostrated to him. I was thinking, why should some twerp like me, a kid from a backward island country, get so lucky as to see such a thing? And not only one of them, but several. The room was quiet and nobody else was around except for one attendant monk who said he'd never seen a certificate of succession before. The master brought out the certificate and it was written on white silk with plum blossoms printed on the bottom of it. I was so happy I cried. That night I stayed in another temple on my way back home and I had a dream. In it the master who had founded that temple showed up and handed me a branch full of plum blossoms. The blossoms were more than a foot wide. Those plum blossoms must have been Udumbara flowers. I'm never sure how to pronounce it. Udumbara flowers? You know, those blossoms that are so rare that almost no one ever sees them. Maybe the state in a dream and the state in waking consciousness are equally real. I've never told anybody about any of this stuff since returning to Japan. So that's the one incident they cite, and let me get on with all of them, and then I will tell you what I think of them. Here is another one, and this is how these authors relate it, and let me just read it to you in their words. Another Yume, so they're defining these events as Yume, which literally means dream, but they're trying to say that the word Yume also covers visions and sort of mystical visions and things. Maybe, I don't know. Let's read it. Another Yume of which we have knowledge was a spectacular one that happened aboard ship during Dogen's voyage home. A severe storm arose and the passengers and crew gathered on deck, fearing the ship would go down. Dogen led them all in the recitation of the Kannon scripture, during which the Bodhisattva Kannon, who's the Avalokiteshvara, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion, appeared to him floating on a lotus flower amidst the waves. Apparently several of the crew saw her also. After this visionary appearance, the storm abated, and the general consensus of those present was that they had been saved by the miraculous appearance and intervention of the Bodhisattvas. Let's see. As with all miracle stories, the question of exactly what it was that happened can be debated, but the fact that the Soto lineage gives credence to the vision is witnessed both by the fact that the story is still repeated today in works officially sponsored by the Soto Shu head office. It's the Vatican-like organization that oversees all the Dogen stuff in Japan. And that a modern sculpture of this visionary canon is to be found gracing the water treatment pond of Eiheiji, as seen in the picture below, and I'll show you the picture on screen. There's a picture of the statue. And then it also says, further support of this story is given by the existence of a 14th century copy of a painting of the same canon supposedly commissioned by Dogen. Appended to this copy is a piece of calligraphy, possibly, an original in Dogen's own hand of his poem of thanksgiving to Kannon. And yeah, okay, I'll read it. From the single blossom 5 leaves uncurled, upon one single leaf a Tathagata, that's a Buddha, stood alone. Her vow to harmonize our lives is ocean deep, as we spin on and on, shouldering our deeds of right and wrong. Okay, yeah. Well, the first one that I read to you is in Shobogenzo, and there's really no doubt that Dogen wrote that himself. This second one, when I looked for sources of this, it comes from a biography of Dogen written about 500 years after he had died. And it doesn't, it's just kind of made up, really. Most scholars who've studied it agree that the writer of this biography just made up these stories. There's no precedent for it in anything else before the biography was written. It's sort of like those stories that you used to hear, at least when I used to hear when I was a kid, about George Washington chopping down the cherry tree and then owning up to his father, saying, "I cannot tell a lie, for it was I who chopped down the cherry tree." It's hagiography. So I don't know why they even say it, and of course their support for its authenticity is kind of weak, if you ask me. Now the last one is one that's a bit of a mystery to me, and I'll just read you what it says here. As remarkable as this vision was, an even more extraordinary one occurred to Dogen on New Year's Day, 1249. As was customary, Reverend Dogen was celebrating a ceremony of gratitude to the 16 celestial Arhants, or Rakan, who are these celestial... Arhant is sort of an enlightened being. Let's just leave it at that. He was celebrating in front of their wooden statues. In the course of the ceremony, Dogen had a vision of rays of light emanating from the statues. Then, in his words, the Rakans caused to appear felicitous flowers, exceedingly wonderful and beautiful. And then they back to their commentary. Finally, to the wonderment of all present, and then this is another quote, supposedly Dogen, the 16 Arhats, standing on a multicolored cloud, descended upon the branches of a pine tree on the eastern side of the temple. Here again, his vision was so powerful that it was shared by those around him, an exceedingly rare event. He interpreted this vision as meaning the Arhants were giving their blessing to his monastery and his teaching. Now, they say, like the vision of Kanon, there is both written and artistic documentation of the occurrence of this event. The original of Dogen's own description, plus sketches of the scene, are to be found in the Ueno Library in Tokyo. I've been to Ueno, but never to the library. While another commentary, in Dogen's hand, they say, is presently located in Kinkyu-in Temple, Matsumoto Shinano Prefecture. Well, okay. I remember I first came across that story in this book, Enlightenment Unfolds, edited by Kazuaki Tanahashi. It is... Ziggy, can you be quiet while I make the video? And let's see. There's two of them in here. There's Omens of the 16 Arhats, and let's see, 3 auspicious signs at Eihei Monastery. They don't talk about that one, but this is one where he. I wonder if they're mixing these two, because this one also involves multicolored clouds and people hearing bells out of nowhere. Stuff like that. You can go read it in the book. I don't want to read you the whole thing. I remember talking to Nishijima Roshi about this because I read it in this book. Did I just say that? Anyway. And he said, yeah, I've heard that story before, but I don't think it's true. The documents that supposedly support it are kind of dodgy. Apparently, it appears in a book called Dogen Zenji Zenshu, which means everything ever written by Dogen Zenji, Master Dogen. I don't have that book, but I found it on Amazon for $35 in Japanese, so I ordered it, and it's supposed to show up in about a month, and I'll let you know. I wonder if this is going to be the actual Zenshu, because I can't imagine that would fit in a book that would only be $35, because he wrote a lot of stuff. Dogen wrote so much stuff. Anyway, we'll see what it is. I haven't checked it out for myself, but I tend to trust Nishijima Roshi's his assessment. The other two places the authors of this cite for that story is a book called Visions of Power by Bernard Faure, and a book called Soto Zen in Medieval Japan by, who wrote this? William Bodiford. William Bodiford and Faure are both Buddhist scholars. I think I hear, what's his name? That dog. Why can't I think of his name? Hercules back there. Maybe I should go have Ziggy meet Hercules and then talk about this after. Okay, Ziggy got to see Hercules, and I'll show you their meeting at the end of the video. So this book, Soto Zen in Medieval Japan, basically recounts the event Yeah, they kind of say the same thing. More than 20 laymen who participated in one precept recitation ceremony at Ahegi in 1247, so they say 1247, the other one says 1249, witnessed the appearance of multicolored clouds shining out from the abbot's building. On another occasion at Ahegi, when Dogen preached to officials or noble ladies, gongs from an unearthly temple bell echoed through the valley, and the fragrance of unknown incense filled the air. Let's see. Dogen also conducted ceremonies for public worship of the 16 supernatural Rakan during one of these services in 1249. Okay, there's a few of these. Rays of light shone out from the images, and the Rakan themselves magically appeared before worshippers, and so forth and so on. This book also recounts the story, but it kind of, let's see, what he says in his thing. He says... One source, with a somewhat hagiographical tinge, reports that during one recitation of the precepts in 1247, some 20 lay people saw multicolored clouds emerging from Dogen's cell. Hagiography, in case... I know there's a lot of people who aren't native speakers of English who watch this. Hagiography is like a biography, but it's a biography in which the person about whom the biography is about, that's bad grammar, is... lauded to the skies and made to seem almost superhuman. So I kind of agree with Bernard Faure. It does seem a little sus, as the kids say. So if you ask me, what we've really got is just one incident. Although there are little bits and pieces throughout Shobogenzo and Dogen's other works where one would get the impression that Dogen kind of seemed to believe these supernatural type of events were possible. Somebody was criticizing me recently in an email saying that in one video I said that Dogen denied these things were possible, and in another video I said he didn't deny them. I didn't rewatch the video, but here's the thing. When I'm writing a book, I can sit there massaging the text, as they say, rewriting, making sure it says exactly what I want it to say. But when I'm speaking like this on a video, it's more difficult to do that. If I said denied it, I meant he denied that they were important. I have never been one of the people who said that Dogen denied these events are possible. He was not a sort of Richard Dawkins type, or one of these neo-atheist types who would tell you that any story of a miracle is just BS and you shouldn't believe it. When he talks in his essay, which Kazuaki Tanahashi also reprints in this book, called Miracles, which I talked about in an earlier thing, mystical powers or something, I think is how Nishijima Roshi translated it, I forget. But he talks about these events as being small stuff miracles, if you'll remember what I said a few videos ago, or maybe it was the last video, and that they were of no great importance because they only occur within the great miracle, which is this stuff you see all around you. That is the great miracle, and the only place these small miracles can happen are within the context of the great miracle. And so what we should really be paying attention to, says Dogen, is the great miracle. And there's a kind of a trend these days in scholarship about Buddhism in the West to try to say that the version of Buddhism we get in the West is Buddhist modernism, and it's influenced by Western thinking, particularly from the 19th century on down, in which people tried to... they wanted to see Buddhism as a rational religion as opposed to the irrational religions of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, according to them. Don't attack me for saying that. And so they tended to get rid of all the sort of mystical or weird or miraculous elements in Buddhism, and that the real Buddhism is full of that stuff. Well, okay, this depends on what you're calling Buddhism, because there's millions of forms of Buddhism, and I don't know if there's millions, but there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of different kinds of Buddhism out there, and some of them pay a lot more attention to these sort of miracles and stuff than others. But there is a stream of Buddhism that goes all the way back to the beginning, right back to the very source, Buddha himself, which kind of says that these sorts of things, whether they happen or not, are not the point. The point is to try to deal with the problem of suffering. And the Buddha himself has famously said that speculation about gods and miracles and stuff like that don't really address the problem of human suffering. So we're going to deal with that. And that's the stream that Dogen followed. Whether they believe this stuff was possible or not, one of the problems when looking at this for Westerners is that we tend to kind of assume, without really thinking about it, that Asian history is the same as our history. So, for example, there was never any sort of scientific revolution. I don't know if I'm using the right term, but okay, we all know from our history classes that there was a big problem in the Middle Ages leading up to the Renaissance when science started to challenge Christian doctrine. And of course the famous story is Galileo, who proposed that the Earth orbits around the sun rather than the other way around, was forced to recant that by the church because they thought it opposed church doctrine. So there was a big fight between science and religion. Okay, that's the point. There was never a big fight between science and religion in Asia. The whole scientific revolution as it occurred over there was much more gradual and gentle, I suppose, and the Buddhism, which was the most sort of popular religion there, didn't really have any problem with science. So there was never this need to say that this is scientific reality and this is just mystical. So in Asian culture, it's sort of all mixed up. You don't really worry about whether that's mystical stuff or scientific stuff. I'm going out on a limb here and somebody's going to eviscerate me in the comments for it, but that's a very basic sort of thing. Of course, there's a lot of nuance to that, and you can argue about that if you want. I'm not going to. So, yeah, for Dogen, it probably was not... The idea for Dogen wasn't to be sort of this Richard Dawkins figure and say that this stuff never happened, and I don't think that was Buddha's intent either. They weren't trying to say these kind of mystical events couldn't happen. They were saying they weren't important. They were saying the important thing is to address the problem of human suffering and not deal with all this other mystical stuff. But this is not to say that this doesn't exist in their minds. And as I say, these three examples that these people who obviously have a vested interest in trying to prove to the world that Dogen was, just as mystical as anybody else, these are the best they can do. And as I say, of the three of them, only one of them is really kind of, to my mind, worth attributing to Dogen. I think the other two are just made up. But maybe when I get that Dogen Zenshu, I can look up that third one and see what I think about whether it's made up or not, too, like the others, or like the one about the boat and the Bodhisattva on the boat, which is obviously made up. So yeah, that's the deal. I don't know if there's a real conclusion to all this. It's just that I want to say that yeah, there's this stuff does appear in Dogen's writings, but again, he doesn't consider it to be terribly important, and that's, I think, the point. One of his successors, Keizan, who came along a few generations later and was the guy who popularized the Soto style of Zen, he was way more into the mystical and miraculous stuff than Dogen was, but Dogen himself really downplayed it, and like I said, he's part of a stream of Buddhists who downplay this stuff and don't necessarily deny it, but deny that it's terribly important, which is a huge difference, especially from the kind of Christianity that I grew up around, which I know doesn't represent all of Christianity. But I remember, and I've told this story many times on this video channel and in books, one of my formative sort of encounters when I was trying to be a Christian when I was in my late teens was from a guy from the Campus Christian Ministries at Kent State University who basically told me Jesus performed miracles and this is why we should believe in Jesus. And I just couldn't get that. How can we prove that Jesus performed miracles? It's written about in these old books, but you know, where's the proof in that? They're just old books. So I really think that Dogen was on the right track, because for people who can't accept the miraculous or the mystical, well, you don't need to. That's kind of my whole point, is you don't need to accept the miraculous and the mystical in order to appreciate Dogen's approach to trying to deal with human suffering. Okay, I've gone on way too long, so that's where I'm going to end it. I hope I've made some kind of a point. If you want to contribute to me continuing to do this stuff, you can go to the URL that you're about to see on the screen below, or that you're about to hear if you're listening to the audio version of this. It is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That's where you can find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. Okay, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Ziggy, you want to go see Hercules? Want to go see Hercules? Come on, let's go. Let's go. You know where he is, right? He's always in that corner there. There you go. Is he back there? Do you see him? Is he back there? Let's see if we can see Hercules. Hey, Hercules. How you doing, buddy? Hi. Is that Hercules? You see him? Is that Hercules?